Had to wait for the drop. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Chris, and today I am joined by several lovely guests, and we're here to talk about all things queer. So this is the Queer Corner. It will be a quarterly podcast-style, long-form discussion video where we celebrate all things queer in literature or any other forms of media. I don't really watch movies or TV, so for me it's mainly books, but if we have other places that we celebrate queer identities, we will bring them to the table for all of the guests. I thought about this for a long time, and the reason that I wanted to start this series or this podcast, whatever, is once a year there is a month, Pride Month, where a lot of big companies start to celebrate us and our identities, and it can be seen as sort of a marketing ploy. So while it is nice to be celebrated and seen during that month, our voices deserve to be heard all year round, and I want to make sure that that conversation is continually happening and to be out for people who aren't able to be. I'm very out in my life, and I love that, but I know that it's not safe for everyone. So this is going to be a safe space for people to come and just chat about queer things. Now, this one is going to be pre-recorded. Going forward into the future, we may be looking at doing these live so people can also contribute to the conversations as we go along. And that is all dependent on if people want to come back and join me. So what we'll do first is a quick round of introductions. We'll start with Jess, and we'll go that direction down to Jeff and then to Roger, and tell us who you are, what you're about, and where people can find you. And of course, all the links will be in the description box down below.
Hi, I'm Jess. I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma, so far away from many of the other people on this panel. I am an after-school arts program director, and I also write novels. So if you are into queer, young adult, sci-fi fantasy, and also this one's like a little bit horror, but definitely young adult, you can check them out. Chris is going to put the links in the bio and stuff. Yeah, and you can also find me on my author website, which is jessmccutcheonwrites.com. And just like all over the social medias. And I also am part of a small press that's just getting started, and we're hoping to center marginalized voices. So like queer, BIPOC, folks like that, called, hang on, I have a postcard. Nope, that's not the right one. I mean, it is a postcard, but anyway, it's called Horns and Rattles Press. And it's going to be in Oklahoma, and we are doing short sci-fi fantasy horror. So you can also check that out. Is that good?
That's awesome.
I am a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. I'm excited, but this is new to me. Awesome. Thank you for having me.
We've all done one of these the first time. Of course, yeah. Of course. Jeff, what about you?
I am Jeff. I'm Australian. I am a teacher of English as a second language. And I just kind of talk about and review books on my Instagram page at Page Glue. That's kind of my whole deal. I like most genres, except like business and sports. But like my main kind of like passion is queer horror. That's what I'm really going for.
We're going to get some recs off you later, Jeff, for queer horror.
Oh, I got him.
All right, Roger, take it away.
I'm Roger. I'm in California. What I do on YouTube is not at all related to what I do in real life. In real life, I'm a PhD student of biochemistry trying to find new targetable pathways in tuberculosis to find new treatments. But on the YouTubes, I am a fantasy booktuber where I pretty much read only fantasy. I say I dabble in sci-fi and other things, but it's really a lie. I really read fantasy. All age ranges, though, at least. So I'm like inclusive in that way. I'll read middle grade, I'll read YA, I'll read adult, but it's pretty much fantasy only.
Roger's favorite genre is domestic thrillers.
I read 1.5 of them and then DNF'd the entire genre.
Cool. All right, thank you, everyone. This episode, I guess, is going to serve as more of an introduction, whereas future episodes will look more into specifically what we've read or consumed within the quarter. So for this one, we're going to do a big introduction to who we are here, our stories, and then maybe some queer characters that we resonated with growing up, and we'll just sort of keep the same pattern going. So the first question is our queer stories in a nutshell. We're all going to rip off that Band-Aid and share with you. Okay. Take it away, Jess.
Okay, so I was a very late coming out person. I grew up in a very conservative town in very conservative Oklahoma. You may have heard of it. We are super anti-gay here. And it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I actually acknowledged that I was bisexual. It's been really fantastic ever since then. I am married to a man, but it just let me kind of reflect on my entire history. And as an educator and a teacher and a part of the community, it's really important to me to be able to express the queer side of myself so that the people that I impact know that I'm a safe space and know that there are queer people in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, which growing up, I didn't think was even an option. So yeah, that's my queer story in a nutshell. I was very lucky that when I came out to my family as a grown person, my mom's reaction was like, "Are you sure you're bi? You're not a lesbian? Like, are you like you're good in your marriage?" And I was like, "It's not about my marriage," sort of thing. So that was I was very fortunate in that response. But yeah, I the books that I write are all set in Oklahoma, specifically in the area I grew up, and they are queer normative because I want kids like me who grew up in Oklahoma who didn't really feel like it was an option. Maybe don't have to be so stuck in that binary with all those expectations put on them. So yeah, everything I write is just kind of like, yeah, kids are queer and they're in Oklahoma because that is true. So yeah, that's a lot of I guess that's my queer story in a nutshell.
Every time you say Oklahoma, it just makes me want to bust out in the Oklahoma.
No, yeah,
wrong time.
No,
wrong time.
I grew up here, and that is still the instinct. Like, so yeah, we're fine.
So what? Just not to break Chris's flow or anything, but yeah. I love doing this anyways. But so what is it like for you as a bi woman married to a man? I feel like that group especially gets kind of erased from most common. And I think because they're always like, well, you're married to a man, so you're like faking it, or like I feel like that's
yeah. And I think that a lot of the reason why I was comfortable with not coming out was because I was in a marriage with a man and I'm happily married to him. Like we work hard on our relationship. But I've had a lot of time to reflect, and I wish that I had been given that time to reflect earlier. I don't think that it would have changed who I'm with. But it would have made me feel more comfortable in my own skin, more understanding of my own emotions and things like that. I think there is a lot of bi erasure, especially in books where it's like, okay, well, she's bi. Why is she with a dude? And it's like, well, because that's who she's chosen to be with type of thing. So that's something I'm very aware of when I'm consuming queer media, is whether there's that sort of erasure, because it does happen a lot. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just curious because I know I've had a couple friends like in a similar situation, so it's always just interesting hearing other people's experiences.
I'm letting my dog out. Sorry.
It is interesting because I was out last night, and people who don't know me and Rach, like we come across as a heteronormative couple. I'm just short as fuck, and that's like the only thing that they can, they see. And I am so out, and I really don't care who knows that I'm a trans dude, and like I'm also bisexual, and I'm not, I don't hide that fact. So I came out last night, people were like, wait, what? And it isn't a weird experience being in what looks like this heteronormative relationship from the outside when people don't know your stories.
When a lot of
didn't mean to.
No, like a lot of the reason why I did come out, because a lot of people have been like, well, you're happily married to a man. Why even bother? And the reason why I bother is because I work with youths. I have a child. Like I want to acknowledge who I am and make that more the norm. We read a bunch of fantasy and like I'd love it if queer normative worlds were just like the norm. Because yeah, I very easily could have just spent my entire life like not acknowledging the queer side of me. I'm much happier that I have, but I feel like it takes, especially in the US, white women need to step up and do things like say, hey, I am bi, married to a man, happy with that. But like I'm queer, so let's just all chill out about all the queer stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thanks, Jess. All right, Jeff, take it away. What's your story? What's the sordid details?
It's not that sorted. Just like grew up like very religious, like church 2 or 3 times a week minimum, kind of like very deep into it. Kind of like was denying my sexuality, even though like it was persistent in my fantasies, we'll say. In like behind the scenes in secret, having a cool gay time, like in my like teenagers into my 20s, and then I didn't really come out to my family until I was 27. I'm 29 now. And they were chill, they were cool. Like everyone kind of knew, like the whole like not getting a girlfriend at all kind of helped along with that. There's still some members of like my extended family that I haven't come out to. But even they've kind of like stopped asking, oh, when are you getting a girlfriend? When are you getting married? And those sorts of things. So I really feel like they've gotten the memo. Yeah, like just not really, like I still have some faith. It's kind of hard to unlearn, but yeah, like just since fully like coming out and accepting myself, I just become so much freer. I feel so much better about myself, like when I look at myself in the mirror, and like the queer community is just like very happy, and like it's not all sunshine and rainbows as much as we like it to be. But yeah, that's kind of my nutshell story.
Is it my turn? Is that why I got quiet?
It's your turn. Yeah.
So I never really was not out. Pretty much as soon as I knew, I started telling other people, and it was in junior high, and that was not the best decision in hindsight. I was born and raised in California, but a couple of towns over, there was neo-Nazi movements. I was in a very like conservative, weird, woodsy area. Neighbors were making moonshine. It was a time. And so my father and he did not like it. I ended up in the hospital. He was in and out of prison. Like that was kind of my experience with being queer as a younger kid. And just like, but I mean, I'm not sad about anything that happened. It just is part of who makes me fabulous. And I've been with my husband now for 15 years this November. So all these hetero people that are getting 15 divorces, I've only ever been with one person, and it's a person I'm still married to. So on you.
We just had my partner and I just had we've been married for 10 years, but together for 15. And yeah, good job. Good on you.
Congrats.
It's work, but I love it.
All right, we're moving on to
enough for you?
Yeah, that was a good nutshell. I feel like I've got less of a nutshell and more of a nut, and that's ironic given my situation. I have come out so many times that my mother asked me for a loyalty card. She was like, if you come out one more time, do I get something for free? And I was like, what do you want, a unicorn? I don't know what to give you, but you don't want it, I promise. Like, whatever it is. So I feel like I was very sheltered and naive as a kid, and so I grew up female until I was 26, but we'll get to that. I first realized that I was attracted to girls at 14, so once puberty hit, but it felt wrong to be attracted to women as a girl, and I didn't know what that meant at the time, and it would take me many years to figure that out. But I stuffed that down really far into the psyche as it could go. And then once I hit 17, 18, and I started university, I was like, no, I am attracted to women. Like, I cannot deny that anymore. Got into a very toxic relationship and was like, yeah, women are great. And mentally hurt me a lot. And then that all ended, that blew up. Oh, it's fine. It's fine.
Like your
And
pain
I had stuffed. Look, as long as people learn things, as we go along, that's all I care about. I then, like, during all of that, I got really jealous of men. Again, had no idea what that meant, but I stuffed any sort of attraction to men as far down as it would go. And I was like, I'm a lesbian now, and I'm happy with that. That's all I'm going to be. And I made that my personality for a good decade, I would say, from that point. I got into a long-term relationship at 18, one that was fairly mentally abusive towards myself, and I didn't know how to get out. And then towards the end of that, I met my now wife. So got out of that not so great relationship and then into a very safe space, at which point my brain decided it was now the time to be like, you're not a girl. What are we going to do with that? And then I just basically, like, my world imploded and my brain imploded for a good few years. So I figured that out at 26. This all happened over an event. We were out shopping and I said something unfair to her, and I still apologize to it for this day, but we're asking about where to go to eat. And I said, oh, women never know where to eat. And she turned around and she said, you're a woman too. And my brain was like, poof. No, I'm not. Now I got to deal with that for the next 3 years. Thanks. So went to therapy, did all the medical transitioning and whatnot. And then after I was comfortable and I'd done the medical transitioning, I had a bit of a question mark around the gay thing. And I was like, oh, men are hot. What do I do with that now? Because I am engaged to a woman. Am I gay? Because that's real awkward for me and for my partner. Anyway, no, still attracted to women, so I'm just sitting safe in the trans and bisexual camp, I guess. But that's my nut, in a nutshell.
Big nut. Good for you.
I remember coming out as bisexual to everyone via a YouTube video, because I started like my trans journey on YouTube as well, because not a lot of people in Australia had done it. It was all like US based or UK based. I'm like, no one is really talking about this journey here in Australia and what that means, because our system's a little bit backwards. There's not a whole lot of accessibility and knowledge for people here. So I started the YouTube channel, and my cousin was watching it at the time, and I did not realize that she was watching it. And then she sent this video to my mum when I'd come out as bisexual and said, is Chris okay? I was like, oh, grace. So I had to have that conversation. I was like, I figured you were over it. I've done this a few times already, so, what's one more? Cool. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your stories. Now we're going to jump into the more character story-based things, so get your recommendations out. First question is, what LGBTQIA plus characters resonated with you growing up? Jess, we'll start with you again.
This is kind of tricky. So there was a show. I don't, like, in hindsight, I'm like, I don't know if they were even gay or not. But I probably should have figured out that I was bi, at least, when I was watching Dark Angel with Jessica Alba. I don't know if you guys remember that show. But in hindsight, I'm like, oh, yeah, like, definitely you were queer. And then just like I've always loved Willow from Buffy. And then also Sporty Spice, who I know not supposed to be gay, but like she was so coded as a lesbian, and it's just like I wanted to be like her. I dress like her. So yeah, there's my answer to those characters. I was definitely not out when I was growing up, but in hindsight, it's like, yeah, makes sense.
For me, like growing up, like I was like denying who I was a lot, and it was very easy to do that when like a lot of like the gay men in media were like very loose-wristed and like flamboyant and flaming and all that like beautiful stuff that we love.
Mm-hmm.
But like for me, like the person that like really resonated, the character was in the Heroes of Olympus and like the what's it called, the one after that,
Percy Jackson stuff with Rick
the
Riordan.
Percy Jackson stuff, all that stuff. There was Nico D'Angelo, who's like a son of Hades, like the god of death. And he's kind of just like living in the shadows, and like he's very like quietly queer, and it's like not made a big deal of, and everyone just kind of like is chill and accepts it. And like I was like, oh, that's more like me. I'm not like loud. And it's just kind of like I never wanted to attract attention to myself for it, and that was kind of like his kind of deal. And then like I was thinking about this when you asked us this question in like the chat, like, oh, now I'm really into like queer horror, and like this the child of like death is like the gay one. And it's kind of like even like the kind of like symbolic like thematic things of like how death is so tied with like the gay history as well, with like AIDS and all that. It's just, I don't know, it's a little bit macabre, but he would be my choice. Yeah.
For me, there weren't that many LGBTQ characters growing up. I'll be 33 this year, so I was a 90s baby through and through. And in the 90s, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, but I don't even know it was in the 90s or the early 2000s, would be Will and Grace. I just loved Jack and Will and their whole dynamic. And that's like the first like piece of queer media that I can remember really consuming that was like overtly queer, that wasn't like hidden in subtext, or if you looked at it sideways, maybe they were queer. That was like the first one that was like super openly queer, which is one of the things I think is so great these days, because there's authors like Jess and there's all kinds of other media for kids that are more queer normative. I think it's going to be a very transformative experience for them.
Yeah, I love that. I was such Will and Grace. So I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but Will and Grace is very much a comfort show for me. And I also loved Will because I also have a stick up my ass most of the time. So I related quite a lot to Will. But I think, and again, this is one of those things where I think I should have known that I was trans. Like looking back on it, is that I never really related to lesbian characters. I always related to queer male characters more. So, and I never really understood it. I would seek out these queer shows. I remember when The Fosters came out, produced by Peter Page, who was in Queer as Folk, the initial American version of Queer as Folk, and he brought up so many things that as I was watching it, and I was in my early 20s at the time when it came out, and we were dealing with, you know, two lesbian parents who had a bunch of foster children, and it was just a family drama essentially, but he wanted to make it as queer friendly as possible. And similar situation to Roger, I didn't really relate to a whole lot of people growing up, but in that show, very early on, they introduced a trans character who hadn't had top surgery and was just sort of talking about it. And my brain at the time did not twig. I didn't understand what being trans was, but I kept watching the show. And I kept getting really excited when this person was on the screen. And I was like, I don't understand why. I don't really understand what it means. And then later in that show, Elliot Fletcher came on as a very open trans person. And again, I was like, don't really understand what trans is, but like that character and a lot of the things that he's talking about, I also, you know, think that way. And I will never forget and we used to watch it with my parents, as once a week we'd sit down and we'd watch an episode together as a way of bridging the gap between understanding, you know, the queer stories. And it was just a way for us to come together with, you know, people. My sister's bi, I'm trans and bi, so a way to bridge that gap. And there was one episode where this trans character, played by Elliot Fletcher, I can't remember the name in the show, was talking about sex and intimacy and how different and touchy that can be for a trans masculine person, and touching on things like dysphoria and things like that. And I just remember being like, yes. The conversation was so respectful around that topic, whereas it wasn't really touched upon. And I'd followed Elliot Fletcher's career then, and he kept turning up in shit that I was watching, and I was like, what is this guy doing in everything that I'm watching? And it sort of was just like a catalyst moment for me. So he ended up being in a show called Faking It, again as like the entry trans character trying to educate, and then he was in Shameless in one of the later seasons doing the same thing. And so it's basically him as a person, but the roles that he was acting in just kept popping up for me, and then it made a whole lot more sense at the end of the day.
Well, and that's why I feel like that's why it's so important to just like every show at this point should have queer characters. Like there shouldn't be, I mean, I don't know, stats or whatever, but like when I'm watching stuff with my kid, there should just be queer people existing. Because it leads to those conversations and it normalizes things and it allows those conversations to happen. It allows those questions to be asked. And it's like, yeah, we're sitting down together and watching the sitcom and there are characters like this. How do I relate to them? I don't know. I think that we need more of that. And I'm glad that I'm glad that Will and Grace exists. You know, for
these days
like
it feels, I feel like people would complain about it more these days because it is more stereotypical.
Oh yeah,
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
cis queer men.
It was very 90s.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of like criticism about Will and Grace, but I watched it with my parents, and I'm glad that I did. You know,
Yeah.
I also watched Frasier. Those guys are gay as fuck. Like, sorry, excuse me. Like I love it. Frasier holds up. Sorry. It's just and I try to like as a mom, a parent, I try to expose my kid to as much like queer normative world building as I can. You know, like this is so silly. I hope it's not too big of a tangent, but I'll be quick. But Spidey and His Amazing Friends, which is this, okay, it's a show on Disney Plus. It's about Spider-Man and his amazing friends. And Doc Ock is gender bent, and they're like it's obviously for little kids, but I just love that it breaks these binaries of like bad guys have to be guys, good guys have to be boys. Like, I don't know, just sprinkle some gay in everything would be just awesome. That's the point of what I'm saying. Sorry.
What we try to do in our lives. That's the gay agenda.
Just sprinkle the gay
and everything. It's fine. And this is going to touch on a later question that we have coming up. But I think as an adult now, even, reading and watching media as it's grown up and seeing things become more queer normative is so nice and refreshing. Like I just read a book where there was no questions asked about one character who happened to be gay, and it was just normal. They were like, okay, sweet, whatever, we'll move on with our lives. And I think that we're getting to that stage where that is becoming more of a thing, and I think that's really important, like you're saying, for the kids that are growing up in this generation to be able just to see themselves in a normal way, not in a way that goes, hey, this person's gay, isn't that great that we're showing this representation? It's just like, this person's gay, let's move on. Like it doesn't matter.
Because I feel like it's either
right, so
like, hey, isn't it great that this person's gay in this book that I've made? Or else it's like, hey, isn't it great that I made this book about how hard it is to be gay? Like it's like we just want stories about kids being gay. Like, is that too hard? Like too much to ask for?
Just let them live.
Just let them be gay. It's fine. Let them be queer and like fight. Like, that's why I write my books. It's like, let them fight aliens and demons and shit. And it's not about them being gay. It's just about them being kids who happen to be gay or queer that are, fighting stuff.
I'm going to read your books. got them on my Amazon wish list
They're very
to
short.
go and get.
Also, the second one I printed in a font that's for dyslexic people, so it looks a lot bigger than it looks a lot longer than it actually is. But I wanted to make it more accessible, so I write very short, like happy, humorous YA stuff.
So it'll be interesting to see what
I
Chris
love
thinks
that.
because happy is not a descriptor that I would use for the book.
I'm going
that
to
he
Jeff
sent
for all
to
his horror
Darius.
recs.
Technically,
Right.
a mean piece of water is horror, but like they end happy because none of the gays die. Like there are some like cis het folks who do die in my books, but
No.
gays live. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
that
good.
makes it less
The way it
appealing.
should be.
Yeah, they live and
Do you
they're
remember that?
accepted, and like their parents are always like, "Yeah, that's fine." Also, it's a YA, so we're gonna be absent so that you can do your crazy shit because that's what is required for young adult fiction. So, anyway,
Do you remember that period of time in horror movies where they would all have like a quintessential gay character and they would all just get shafted first?
yeah,
They
kill
would
the
all
gays.
just be the
Bury
first
the
one to
gays.
go. Like, oh, there goes the
Mhm.
gay. Like,
Yeah, because then there's even horror movies that would make fun of that. They would have the
Alright.
gay character being like, I'm not
jump into the
dying
next question.
first."
What is your favorite LGBT?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so next question is favorite LGBTQIA plus character in any form of media at the moment, whether that be film, TV, books, whatever.
I'm watching Last of Us, and Ellie is queer. It's not super defined, but I'm obsessed with her. And then also Fabiola in Never Have I Ever, which I know Mindy Kaling has been getting some heat for stuff from the Mindy Project or whatever. But Never Have I Ever is really cute, and Fabiola is this tiny little gay girl, and I just love her. So yeah, as far as like TV stuff goes, those are my favorites right now.
I'm really loving if you watch the Netflix show Sex Education,
Yes.
there's Eric, who's he's just so good. He's so good at I love him because he's so like earnest.
Yes.
He's just very like honest about like how he's feeling. Like if he's concerned, he's like very concerned and expresses that a lot. And when he's like angry or when he's happy, he's just like very expressive. And then like if you haven't seen the show, like his outfits are like bright, colorful, stunning, like fashion queen, it's amazing. And it's kind of like, you know, like I don't want to be like, I'm generally a pretty restrained person, but like just that whole idea of like, this is who I am, deal with it kind of thing.
I love
get
that
on board.
He is so, I love him so much. He must be
So
protected.
sweet. Oh.
Love it.
Yeah, can't recommend the show enough if you haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people trying to convince me to watch it, but I've been watching other things.
Watch it. Watch it. It's so
We're
sweet.
in the middle of The Last of Us right now, okay? And then
Okay, there's only 8 episodes of The Last
I sat
of
there
Us.
crying for
Finish
long
it.
enough. So now I'm playing Diablo 4 and killing demons to let out my inner demons. Like it's a whole... Favorite characters in any form of media at the moment? I don't know. The ones that resonated with me most recently, besides episode 3 of The Last of Us, would be Nick and Charlie in Heartstopper.
Oh.
The wholesomeness of it and just seeing a queer male-male relationship that wasn't just all about the physical. It was just about kind of connecting as people. Beautiful. I have a whole YouTube video where I cry about it. So, but I love that show.
You know, I haven't watched Heartstopper because I, like Roger said,
gonna leave
don't
now.
like happy things, apparently.
Watch
Leave
it.
video.
We're gonna meet you, Chris. We're gonna meet
Until I watch the first episode.
You can go watch Heartstopper. We'll talk while you do it, and then you can come back and we can discuss it.
I just don't watch TV. So for me, I don't have any characters that come to mind in terms of film or TV, just because I don't watch a whole lot of film or TV. But I will say, and a book that surprised me that a buddy read with Roger was A Taste of Golden Iron by Alexandra Rowland. And there was a character in that book which really resonated with me to the point where I gave it a 4-star. And it was a fantasy romance. I'm not a big romance reader, and his name was Evermere. And he was such...
You would, with the most by the book, kind of slightly to the point of being boring.
I am slightly to the point of being boring. I understand that. But I related so much to him, and it just his very, like, stick in the mud. I like rules. I don't want to paint outside this box at all. And then falling in love with someone who just is so outside of the normal scope of what you would expect for him, and having that be a male-male romance, it very much reminds me of my relationship with Rachel, because she took me by surprise, and she is not... Her personality and my personality are like... They're just opposite. So that character, and seeing that in a book form, was like, holy crap, someone has been able to capture what it felt like for me, discovering again that I was attracted to men, and also the weird stop start, I don't know, I'm very uncomfortable with it, have to take it super slow feeling. And you know, that author did that for me. So that's probably my favorite recent experience with a queer character. I've answered my own next question. Damn it, I'm gonna think again.
What is the next question? In books.
Ooh, I have books for this.
Hey, I got books.
My turn? Okay.
It's your turn.
Okay, so this is just for right now, because these are subject to change. But right now, I'm really into...
I really want to read, even though I knew the end.
I'm really into detective women who wear snazzy suits and fight bad angels. So Master of Jinn has been out for a while by P. Jelly Clark. Absolutely love it. Fatma is a badass detective who wears super tailored suits and like uses a cane, but like just in a snazzy way, and fights demons and angels and like other constructs in 1920s Egypt. Love it. And then I just read this by Seal Poke, and it is so good. And it's called Even Though I Knew the End, and it is a noir detective type fantasy thing, and the main character is a warlock who's like kind of been shunned by the other magical people in the world because she sold her soul. I'm not going to give any more details because of spoilers, but also snazzy queer detective lady in a suit. So that is my current type. Highly recommend both these books. So yeah, that's my favorite. It's for now, like for the purpose of this conversation.
We'll ask every quarter and just see if it changes each quarter.
I mean, I'm going to have a type. It's probably this type, but hopefully I'll find some new books that fit the, bill. So, yeah.
Have you read any of Justina Ireland's books? YA books?
Yes, Dread Nation, right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Also, Ring Shout, though, like by B. Jelly Clark as well, though they don't wear such snazzy suits. But like, I love a snappy dress, fantasy detective lady. That's
if you're not in a suit, you're out in Jess's books. That's
not that you're out, but like if you're in a suit, you're ahead.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was very prepared. That was the quick, like based on all the questions that you had. I was like, oh, I know my favorite character. The books right here.
I'm gonna go 2 as well. I've got Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. The main character Darius is like in this book, he actually doesn't address his sexuality yet, not until like the sequel, but like it's kind of like implied. And he's just like, he has depression, but he's medicated, and like he's and that has like also the side effects of like gaining weight as well, and like just this kind of like normalization of like mental illness, and like really earnestly like trying to connect with people. Like I feel like with queer people, that's like we have so much trauma with that. Like just trying to understand me at my level. Darius, like this is just like such a sweet book about friendship and like immigrant families, and connecting to your home and culture, and about friendship. It's really cute. It's YA. And the other one that I have is also YA. It is The City Beautiful by Aden, Polydoros. It's also an immigrant story of like, it's historical fiction, kind of horror, more like gothic in tone. And the main character, Alter, is this Romanian Jewish boy who loses his best friend, and is just like, again, there's just like that earnestness that I was talking before. Just like bring, I guess this is the main thing. Yeah, I can't die them. Those are my.
Okay, I mean, there's too many. I guess
Yeah.
Chris knows that I have to bring this up in basically any discussion ever because I love Anita Blake by Laurel K. Hamilton so much. So this time I'll pitch it on the queer front instead of the weird romance front. So she goes through a lot of the conversations that we've been talking about where she ends up actually being in a polycule, and they have a lot of conversations about consent and the non-monogaminess of it all. And then she later on develops feelings for a woman and goes through this whole struggle of dealing with that because she's always only ever been attracted to men before. And so there's a lot of good queer stuff in that. But Anita Blake is a obnoxiously long running series. I think book 29 is coming out this month. And she's a vampire hunter. So it's one of those worlds kind of a la True Blood, but it started before True Blood did, where vampires have been legalized and they have determined that they cannot be held in normal prisons. So they have legal vampire executioners. And since she also has the powers to raise the dead for a living, she has some immunity to some of their powers. And so she becomes a legal vampire executioner. And so, especially in the early books and the more recent books, basically every book is kind of like a murder mystery of the week type flavor with different supernatural creatures. So fairies, all the different kinds of everything, Nagas, crazy ancient vampires, like all of it. There's like murder mystery of the week. And then there are 3 or 4 books in the middle that devolve into interesting erotica, like BDSM erotica, I'll say. It gets a little dicey, but we do unjump the shark and go back to more of the murder mystery of the week thing. So that has to be one of my favorites. And then I guess from a more...
We just met, and you're going to recommend a 29-book-long series to me as your first...
I'm not afraid of long series. And
just 29.
Fine, I'll recommend a shorter one for you. So The Final Strife by Sara El-Arifi. It's book 1 in the... I don't know what the series is called. Whatever that series is, The Final Strife and then The Battle Drum. It is a queer normative world. There's even trans characters, all of that kind of stuff. It starts kind of early 2000s dystopian feeling where there's like the caste system and then there's like a competition where you can kind of become a leader of the society, and then it explodes in book 2 and everything is crazy and nothing is what you thought it was. And people are not... There is still oppression in the world, but it's not because of skin color or gender or anything like that. It's because of the color of their blood specifically. They have different colors of blood: clear, blue, red, etc. And at birth, the main characters were like swapped. So like the reds are at the top, and then the blues, and then the clear-blooded is at the bottom. And it's like very adult. The clear-blooded people are oppressed. They're tongues are removed and their hands are chopped off at birth to keep them oppressed because they theoretically rose against the empire at some point in the past. So this is very dark, Chris. You're welcome. But there's also
I know it's on my list of things to read, but I keep bumping it for
there's
indie books.
also a bi love triangle with a girl trying to figure out what she's doing in life.
All right, you're appealing to all of us.
And that is only supposed to be a trilogy.
I like
Book
it.
2 is coming out in May.
There you go.
So I recommended the long one that's been running since the 90s, and then the other one that just started last year.
I love that you got Mark. So Roger and I are mutual friends with an author, Mark Timoney, and Roger got Mark addicted to Anita Blake. He just blitzed through like the first 5 books in a row and burnt himself out on it. Like, he wouldn't stop.
I mean, in his defense, the first 2 are like maybe 200 pages. They do get like longer and longer.
Yeah, they're fairly short.
29 is a lot of books.
Yeah, but
It
I
is
also
a
have
lot
like
of
the
books.
Drift series right here. Book 39 is coming out this fall. Like, I am not afraid of a long series. I am there for the commitment. I just finished all of the stupid Wheel of Time, which maybe I have regrets, but I did read it.
I have a question. Have you read the Dandelion Dynasty?
No, I have book 1.
Not
Would
yet.
you like books 2, 3, and 4? Because I will send them to you for free.
Sure.
They're
Or just like, yes, free books, indeed. That is on my 2024 list, I think. I'm not going to get to it this year. It's not happening.
It's not gay, just so you know.
I just like
And I also
political
hear it's kind of
fantasy
low
as well.
magic.
So.
I hear it's kind of more historical
It
feeling-ish.
is. Ken Liu is an amazing person. Those books
I read the
were
Paper Menagerie.
very long. And they are not gay enough for me. Like, I have like
Are they gay at all?
Like, I'm not gonna. There are 8 trillion billion gazillion books to read. Like, I'm not gonna read books that don't have queer characters. Like, I'm just. I mean, and if I do, you know, like, it's because I somehow managed to make it an obligation. But like, you know, just saying, I have a lot of extra copies because of a publisher promotional error. So I can send you copies of the Dandelion Dynasty.
Yes, please, because then I don't have to pay money.
Yes, that's perfect. We'll talk after this. Not to you folks in England and Australia. Like, I don't have.
That's fair.
Wait.
The amount of
Shipping's too much.
shipping is outrageous. Someone messaged me the other day, Cassidy Farlane, and she asked if she could send me one of her books, and I was like, yeah, sure, but like, shipping to Australia sucks if you're anywhere else in the world. So I was like, here, I'll chuck it on an Amazon wish list. It's going to be cheaper for you to do it that way. But she used Ingram Spark. I don't really understand a whole lot about Ingram Spark, but that ended up being the cheaper option.
Is that an indie author? Is it an indie author?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
It's a YA, Roger. I'm trying, okay, to read more YA.
Yeah.
As long as you don't generalize,
YA
that is the
sci-fantasy.
part that I will pop into people's comments and DM sections when they're like, it was too YA. And I'm like, sir,
I know.
man, I'm going to need more details because you generalizing an entire age range is unacceptable to me.
Yeah, because
I had a video and sorry, Jess, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, so in America, at least, the only print-on-demand services there are for indie authors are Ingram Sparks or Drafted Digital. If you don't want to get sucked into the Amazon maw, so
Because they kind of block you from doing anything else, right? Once you're with
yeah,
Amazon,
if you do Amazon,
Yeah.
like if you do Amazon, you're only doing Amazon. It's also really frustrating for independent booksellers to get books from Amazon because Amazon doesn't want indie booksellers to screw with Amazon. They're like, no, we're. So, as an indie author who chose to fight against Amazon's stuff as much as I can, it's difficult. But yeah, so just like Chris, you had mentioned that an Ingram Spark thing, and yeah, basically there's 2 print-on-demand services in America right now that aren't Amazon. One is Drafted Digital, one is Ingram Spark, and they both distribute from the same space. So just kind of gotta wait.
Yeah, I have heard more indie authors going down that Ingram Spark route if they can, just to steer clear of Amazon's nonsense.
And if you
I'll
ever
answer this question very quickly. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, if you
Jeff,
ever
yeah,
want,
it's okay.
if you ever want to do a video talking about things that American authors at least can avoid as pitfalls, like I'm always trying to warn indie authors about why Amazon
sure.
isn't the best. Like why, like it's like, yeah, it's worth it to buy your own ISBN, like things like that. In other countries, it's free. I don't know what it costs in England or Australia. I know in Canada, it's free to buy an ISBN. In the United States, it's not. So just if you ever want to do some sort of like PSA about self-publishing, people get so fucked by Amazon. It sucks. It sucks so much. People get so screwed by them. It sucks.
I didn't realize all the Audible
how
stuff.
bad it was for some of it until Brandon Sanderson did his thing where he's talking about Audible, how much it screws people, and I was like,
"Yep,
damn."
And he's a big fucking author. Like he's a big deal, and like I'm so glad that big authors are talking about it because it trickles down. Like Amazon, Audible, like all of it. It's not just driving out like independent booksellers, but also indie authors, and people get so caught up because it's like, oh, I'll just use the free Amazon thing. Anyway, sorry, tirade. We can.
Oh, good. I
what
think
are
it's
your favorite characters?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. No, I basically only have one that comes to mind whenever a favorite queer book character is brought up, and that would be Jesper from Dreams of the Dying by Nicholas Lietzow.
I almost.
So, yeah, it was the first time that I had read about a bisexual male. A lot of the time when I was reading queer romances, it tended to lead more towards the sapphic. But, you know, now coming into the indie world, I think a lot of indie authors are really trying to make their voices quite queer normative. And I believe Nicholas Lietzow is also part of the LGBTQIA plus community. And for him to have written a character who was just like, I sleep with men and women and it doesn't really matter, and not apologize for that, was the first time that I'd experienced that, where it was a male perspective being like, I don't really care, and I just like the person rather than, you know, the genitalia, but then, you know, it would go into more bi than pansexual stuff. And that is still my favorite character. It's still the character that always comes to mind when somebody asks who my favorite LGBTQIA plus character is in a book. And I think it was, and even the male love interest in the book, I also really appreciate. I can't remember the name, but I also really appreciated that storyline within that book, but I can't remember what his name was.
I was ready to be shocked though, because when you said Jesper, I was like, "Are you going Six of Crows?" And I was like, "Who are you, Chris?" And I was like, "Oh, Dreams of the Dying." Okay.
People keep telling me to read Six of Crows. I'm like,
I don't think you'd like it.
I think I would hate it.
Tired. Like I feel like I've outgrown Six of Crows. Like I can't get in on that.
For me, it was fine, but like I don't think that you would like it, Chris. For what you like in media, it's not queer enough to please Jess. And then I don't think it's dark enough to please you. I think that you would just think Kat
it's not
like
dark enough.
And broody.
Yeah, Dreams of the Dying is dark.
I must say, after you've Dreams of the Dying is one of the darkest things I've ever read. It's you've got me thinking about, what's that one that Elle liked, the YA trilogy, Flamefall,
the Aurelian Cycle,
something around. Yeah, I've been thinking about that because you said that was really dark. I'm like, maybe.
I don't know. That's not. Was that would not be Aurelian Cycle that I was talking about? Dark. I don't know. Aurelian Cycle is the very political one where they ride dragons and it's like alternate whatever.
I don't know. We'll talk because I'm curious about it. All right. Jess needs a quick break, so I'm just going to quickly remove the camera and you can come back and we'll just chat.
Yeah, I don't think.
All right, Jeff, this is. Sorry, Roger.
Oh, I was just trying to think. I was like, it can't have been Aurelian Cycle because it's not dark.
I don't know. It was like a super political one.
It is
Fire-
super political.
fire
It has
something?
inspirations from Plato's Republic.
I have no idea. I have so many books on
Fireborn,
my shelves.
Flamefall, and Fury
Yeah,
Song.
that's the one I'm thinking of.
Okay. I don't know. I would call it
I have
dark.
I have books on these shelves here, which I actually bought from the old house to be here for the 7 months before we move, which I picked up off Elle's recommendation, but I'm like, they're so, like, they're YA, and I don't know whether I would read them, but they've made it here, so, like, at least I'll give them a go, but then I'm looking at them, and I don't know whether I will actually give them a go.
I think I have a spoiler-free review that you could go watch for more about it for the whole Aurelian cycle.
Oh, yeah. Jeff, tell us about queer horror as a filler while we're waiting for Jess to come back.
Queer horror. A lot of what I've been reading is just like normal horror, but like with centering queer characters. But something I'm really into is like so much like we are considered like the demon in the closet. And so like I'm really interested in like the horror books where like the queer person is the monster. Like I'm just like embracing like fear of the other, like I am the other and you better watch out. A lot of the stuff I know because like I've only started reading horror like 2 years ago. And so like everyone's kind of like whenever people think of horror, they think of like Stephen King, and I've tried 2 Stephen King books and I DNF'd them both. And like everyone has this kind of like idea of what a horror book is, and I'm kind of like understanding it as like you know, like those color wheel gradients where like you want to choose what color you're doing.
Yeah.
Like horror is like the darkest gradient on like, so like you could have like a fantasy horror or like a sci-fi horror or mystery horror kind of. Like one of my favorite queer horror books, it's called The Brightlands by John Fram, and it's like a police procedural, but there's like this very sinister, there is like some supernatural stuff, but like it's very sinister, like spooky, creepy, weird the horror. It's really cool. I'm really into it.
The one queer
You've been
horror that I
demoted
have
now.
read.
Bottom row with me.
Just got shafted to the bottom. The one queer horror that I have read was Eric LaRocca was Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, and that was messed up. So I like horror. I like Stephen King, but I think you have to really like slow burn slice of life stuff and psychological horror. I don't think Stephen King is for everyone, and it is the name that people go to when horror is mentioned, but I also would argue that there is better horror out there for what you're looking for.
If we're talking about queer horror, I did read Patricia Wants to Cuddle, which is a pretty
what a title.
It's an
horror or
it perfectly fits it. It's a multiple point of view. I'm not going to give anything away, but basically it is a reality TV show like The Bachelor that ends up filming on this remote island off of the coast of Washington State. And Patricia is essentially like a Bigfoot character. It is super horror, gory thriller. But also
I'm just watching Roger's face as you explain this.
Like it's hard to explain.
Well, the only horror books I own is like the Small Spaces Quartet, which is like middle grade Goosebumps adjacent by Catherine Arden. So
I like really abstract horror. Like I love abstract horror, like artsy things that you come away with being like, what have I just consumed?
Yeah.
I don't like, I have to go and think of that. And I like that in cinema as well. But yeah, I'm definitely coming to you for some more recs that aren't Stephen King. Jeff, I'll message you after this.
I got him.
Is there some more queer horror?
I didn't start reading horror until I made friends with the owner of a bookshop that like specializes in horror. I was like, oh, I guess I need to read horror now. And I'm kind of into it.
I think there's a lot of conversations that can be done through the horror genre, and I think it's similar to like sci-fi and fantasy, and that argument that somehow those genres are lesser than lit fic. It's like, well, the themes that we're exploring are so deep and so dark within these genres that, you know, have you read anything that's explored the thematics? So yeah, I hate that argument, but I think horror opens itself up really well to explore humanity as, you know, as an entity.
I will say I'm really bad at reading horror, and I'm constantly like, I love this character, and everyone in the horror book club is like, you're not supposed to love that character. I'm like, are you sure? Because I feel like what they were doing like was fine, and everyone's like, no, you're not supposed to like them. And I'm just saying, I'm just cautioning everyone, if you decide to join a horror book club, maybe don't be like me and immediately insert yourself in the conversation, and like sit back and be like, oh, they all hate this guy who like XYZ. I'm not gonna say it. Anyway.
I'm just the biggest wimp with horror. Like, I will get scared and I will make my husband get up and go pee with me in the middle of the night because I woke up and there's a scary sound. Like, we are not, like, this year he decided that we were going to watch the whole Conjuring universe for Halloween.
Nope.
Rude. It was a hate crime, basically. It was very rude.
Going back to the queers and not Roger's domestic situation when it comes to horror movies.
You okay, Roger?
Roger's still reeling from this experience of watching The Conjuring.
There's so many of them too. Why are there so many?
There are so many of them. Did he make you do the spin-offs as well, like Annabelle and
yes,
all
we watched all of them. All 9 or whatever. Like,
that is rude. Like, no one can be expected to sit there for that long. Okay. What do you look for in representation when it comes to any form of media as queer adults? Jeff, we're starting with you now because
I was just going to say I've been bumped up to first place.
First speaker. Yeah.
What I want. One of my favorite authors is this guy named William Melvin Kelly. Not queer, but he does write some queer characters sometimes. And something that he's like a brilliant writer. He's just amazing. But what I really love about him is that he honors his characters, like whatever part of them, like he honors every single aspect of them. And that's kind of like my metric for how I like look at representation. Do they honor their queerness, or is it just like or is it just a stat, like they have dark skin or blue eyes, or oh, they're just gay, full stop. Now that doesn't mean that the story has to like pivot and really center that entirely, like in terms of like side characters, but like do they actually like acknowledge it? Is there like a conversation of like it's a queer woman, does she express her queerness in any specific kind of way, whether that's dating or like, I don't know, even just like a little pin flag or something? Like, do they go into it at least a little bit? Yeah, because otherwise, like, it's kind of like that, like what you're talking about, like with corporations, kind of taking all of our aesthetics to sell more merchandise. Is it just like that kind of shallow, hollow representation, or is there something deeper? Like we live in a society, and queer people are a part of that society. And so, like, if we're here, we're here. You know, we're here, we're queer, we're drinking beer.
Are we though?
Are we?
It is.
I mean, it's 10:30.
Oklahoma. We're drinking beer.
I'm not judging you. There was I think it was like whiskey and book talk that happened a while ago, and I was like, it's 9 a.m. Do I want a whiskey?
Hmm.
Does that make me question my life choices? I did it anyway because Australia. Anyway, we'll leave that for another time. Thanks, Jeff. Roger.
I think it's easier to say what I'm not looking for in representation when it comes to queer rep, and I really am getting kind of tired of queer characters only being used for their trauma. Like, I'm really pretty sick of seeing the queer bashing, all of that garbage. Like, at this point, I really just want it to be they're queer characters, they're just characters, and that's just a facet of who they are. I don't want it to be like, it's the gay character who comes in and says a sassy quip and then leaves. Like, if it's just background, like, I think a good example of somebody who does it and they're like meaningful characters and they have like real queerness to them, but they're not just like there for stereotypes. So I think David Douglas does it pretty well in the Vagrant Gods trilogy. He has one sapphic character who is in like a female romance who's like a main sub character, and then there's a different character who has a former male thing going on, and just like I like it to just be characters that are there and just enriching it, and they're not there just because they're queer, kind of like what Jeff was saying. So I'm just getting tired of the like every time something bad happens, like there's a shooting in America, and then all of a sudden there's some like horrific queer story because they can sell it now. Like, please stop. And please don't tell that story unless it's your story. I know like there's the whole own voices thing is a touchy subject, and I get that. But like if you're going to be telling queer trauma, I feel like it behooves you to be at least somewhat part of the queer community in some kind of open facet first, because it is hard sometimes for people, and there will be those questions of like, why are you telling this story if it's not your story to tell, kind of thing.
That's actually something that I very consciously did in my books, because I was not someone who needed to come out, essentially. And so I made sure that my books aren't about trauma, and that I wasn't centering stories that were grander than my own, if that makes sense. Also, just like piggybacking on what both of you said, I have a friend who always likes to say that every character in a book she reads is Black unless she's told otherwise. And I kind of am adapting that to queer folks. I'm like, yeah, I just kind of assume they're queer until someone tells me otherwise. And that it, that's the kind of representation that I want. It's like, let's not define it until it's necessary to define it. Like if it's important to the plot, then sure, we can figure out who the romantic interest is or whatever. But until then, I just kind of assume everyone's queer and Black. Like,
Love that.
saying.
My answer basically mirrors everyone. I don't like when cishet people put in queer trauma if they've not been touched by it in their lives. Now, I obviously don't know these people who are writing these books, so maybe they've had a family member that has gone through something like that, which, if you've been touched by it in some way, shape, or form, I think that's different than if you're just writing it for the sake of writing it, and having a queer character go through trauma because they're gay or they're queer. To me, it's in a similar vein of female characters who can only grow because they've been raped or they've had some sort of sexual trauma, and I hate that so much when that is the only way that a female character can grow in a story is some form of sexual abuse. And I think that queer characters can and have been used in similar ways where it's just to further the trauma of a plot, and I don't like that. What I tend to look for nowadays is when queer stories shock me in that they're so normal within whatever I'm reading, regardless of whether that book has been written by someone within the queer community or not, but something that just feels so normal and so natural. That's what I'm looking for, is for it to not be such a big conversation. It's just this person happens to be sexually attracted to the same gender or all genders, or they're not sexually attracted to anyone at all because they're asexual. Like it's not a plot point, it's just a thing about those characters. And a good example of that for a indie book that shocked me is The Soul's Aspect by Mark Holloway. He wrote this beautiful friendship group within a magic school between 3 boys, and 2 of them just happened to fall in love with one another, and it was so natural and lovely, and I didn't want to tell the 3rd boy because I didn't know how he would feel about it, but it just felt so authentic to have that representation in the story for what it was. Like, that's what I'm looking for, is that sort of dynamic and beautiful, authentic flourishing of queer stories without it having to be a plot point.
Episode 3 of The Last of Us.
Yeah. But you're gonna cry.
I haven't watched it. I don't cry. I don't have emotions.
Oh,
I'll let
don't
you all
cry at
know if
TV
I
shows,
cry.
but literally for 20 minutes, and my husband was like, "Are you crying?" And I was like, "No."
Dude, I was watching it and my husband fell asleep and I was like sobbing. I was so mad. I was like, how dare you fall asleep on the couch while Ron Swanson goes through this situation?
I will watch it.
So
I know
sad.
that Rachel wants to watch it, so I think we were waiting for all the episodes to be out so that we could just
They're out now.
like binge it.
They are all
Okay,
out
but
now. That's what we did.
I've
We
got
bought 1
Heartstopper
month of
before the
HBO.
next queer corner.
We'll
I've got to
pause
watch
it while
Heartstopper.
you go watch
and-
it.
You can recover from The Last of Us with Heartstopper.
Yeah, okay. I will say the only time that I really like cried during a television show, and the new Queer as Folk that came out last year was awful. It was the worst, but it had a male to female trans character in it, and one of the episodes was her backstory. And I was by myself at the time watching this, and I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. And like her backstory went through to high school and all the little things that came up for. I was a mess for hours after it. I was like, I've been seen by this teenage woman, and I don't know how to deal with the emotions. But I like remember messaging Rachel and be like, I'm not okay. I don't know how to deal with any of that. But that's like the only time a show has got me.
And that's why we need to normalize queer shit in literature. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't, like, I don't know. It just should be like a regular thing. And like, I teach little humans who are nominated by their teachers because the teachers are like, these kids are hot messes. They need some help. I swear to God, every time I have some earrings, like I've got these earrings that are like little like rainbow things. And then I have some Sculpey earrings that a student of mine made that are bi. And I swear every time I wear them, a different kid comes out to me and is like, don't tell my mom, but I'm bi or pan or non-binary. Like, these kids know the terms, which is freaking amazing. And I'm so happy for them. And if there was just like, I don't know, I guess that's just like my utopia, is where everything is just normalized. And it's like, yeah, you're a little weirdo because you're in 4th grade and you want to make a Dracula coffin, and also you're pan and everyone accepts you. Like, sorry, I'm babbling, but like, I think the more representation that we can have in books and TV and film, the easier those conversations are going to be for kids to have, and the more ready their caregivers are going to be to have them. Like, we just,
I think that's what made the Fosters so special for me. It was just like, hey, let's watch this together, and this is what we need to,
talk
come
about.
to terms with. Yeah. All right. So last question, and just in the sake of time, because I appreciate you all, I'm guessing you've got other things to do today. I know Roger's like in PhD mode where every second is science.
Well, no, I'm more thinking about dinner at this point. I'm not doing anything with my thesis this week. I'm just playing the open beta of Diablo 4 with my husband in couch co-op.
I was I'm going to amend this question a little bit. And what is an LGBTQIA plus story that you have read and enjoyed over the last quarter and has made an impact, and then maybe one that you're looking forward to in the future?
I've got the latest Justina Ireland book, Rust in the Roots.
Yes.
Something I love about Justina Ireland is that, like, if you want a young Black woman who is completely unembarrassed and unashamed of, like, her queerness, like, Justina Ireland is for you. This is a historical fiction fantasy horror. Like, it's got like a bit of like Annihilation kind of vibes as well.
They are all my buzzwords. I'm immediately adding that to the TBR.
And like, I wasn't expecting it to go that like creepy and scary, and it did. It was awesome. Yeah, like just really well written, really cool, like fantasy magic system. Yeah, awesome. And then one that I read this week was Hell Followed With Us. Who's that by? Andrew Joseph White. It's like a trans post-apocalypse with some like kind of gross, gory horror, and also like religious cults, which is fun. One that I'm looking forward to, Lee Mandelo wrote Summer Suns, like a Southern Gothic horror, gay and trans book. And he's got a book coming out this year called Feed Them Silence. It's like, I think it has to do with like animal horror. Weird, I don't know. But I love that book, so definitely gonna get that.
I don't know. Crap. Like LGBTQ story, so something that featured LGBTQ. I guess I'll say The 99 Boyfriends of Micah Summers by Adam Sass. It's a contemporary YA romance that is kind of like a Cinderella-esque retelling. Boy meets boy on a train. Boy leaves his cool jacket behind. He goes on a hunt to find boy who fits into jacket. But it then evolves beyond that and starts to have some interesting conversations about young love and kind of jumping the gun too soon and like certain aspects of things that I think are important conversations for especially young queer people, because queer culture does tend to be centered around a lot of sexual conversations that it doesn't necessarily need to be, but that kind of is the culture where it's at this moment. And so I think that is a nice counterpoint to that kind of conversation. And it was male romance written by a gay man, which is like the chupacabra of romance books. That'll be my answer. I don't know.
I thought for sure you were going to take that opportunity to tell me to read The Jasmine Throne again.
I'm never going to read that.
But that's not featuring queerness. I mean, it does. So, like, I think The Jasmine Throne gets a bad rap, and people think that it's by one, because the covers, and two, because they always hear that it's part of the sapphic trifecta, or it's very sapphic romance. But it's kind of like a subplot where I think you would appreciate it, Chris, because the characters are so much more than that. They have these really interesting conversations. They really are their own people. They have their own driving forces that they are focused on. And then the romance is kind of happening. They're trying to come to terms with like, well, I need to do this for my people. But that's kind of in conflict with my relationship with you. So like, what do I do with that? But I think people think that it's like a romance heavy book, and it's really not. It's like epic, dark political fantasy with body horror elements in the magic, with like gross vines that crawl out of people's skin and will eventually kill them if they can't be stopped, with these like maybe extra terrestrial alien things maybe being the cause of the magic, but it's really unclear. Like, I think that you would really like it. But it doesn't, I wouldn't say that it's like a queer story.
For Parcel.
Sorry, what is a sapphic trifecta? Can someone?
It was what the Jasmine Throne, The Unbroken. It was like a Bookstagram thing.
Wasn't it The Faithless or something?
Yeah, maybe. I can't remember. I didn't read any of them.
I get so confused.
The other one was She Became the Sun, right? With Shelley Parker Chan.
maybe.
I am looking forward to the second book in that series.
He who drowned whatever. He who drowned himself. I don't know. What is it called?
He who did something of note. Basically. I liked the first book. I know a lot of people didn't, but I really appreciated the gender bending and the conversations around that. But I also learnt Mandarin for 8 years. So there was a lot of very nostalgic feelings for me in that book in terms of just the setting and the way that people were talking, because it just felt very much like learning, Mandarin for a long time in my life.
I think for that book, it was like pitched as like the Song of Achilles and Mulan, and it's not that.
It's not like either of them at all.
At all.
I've also heard such bad things about the queer rep in the Song of Achilles that they kind of changed one of the characters to make him more heteronormative in a relationship, and that has made me not want to read the book. Because they were both supposed to be badass warriors in history, and then one of them kind of stays home and is less badass warrior.
Yeah, one's like a homemaker.
I can't remember because I read it like 5 years ago. I don't know, whenever it came out. But I do know I bawled my eyes out. Song of Achilles. That's all I remember.
I have it. I just haven't read it.
I was like, it was so good. That's all I've got. I have no analysis or concrete plot points to express to you. Like, I don't.
I just know, like,
anything.
historically speaking, both of those characters were badass warrior people in their own right. And then Song of Achilles, she made one of them Patroclus or whatever, more Susie homemaker to make it a more heteronormative relationship.
Yeah.
Questionable for a cis hetero white woman to be making a more heteronormative queer romance.
Yes.
We've touched on pain points.
Yes,
is that dragging your bones?
Okay,
Yes,
so
please.
this is Belle of the Ball, and I know it is not what any of you all normally read. It is a graphic novel.
Ooh.
And what I loved about it is that no one was the bad guy. Like, it was about some gay young women figuring their shit out. And no one was a villain. And it was very cute. So I recommend this, Belle of the Ball.
So if you like graphic novels, have you read Life of Melody?
No.
Adorable, male. They find like a baby in the forest and decide to be together to raise this baby together. It's very cute. It's a graphic novel.
Please message that to me. Okay, stuff I'm looking forward to reading. I have like 8% of this book left. It's called Meru. It's fucking awesome. It is just sci-fi, like queer normative, people going to other planets. Like, it just, I don't know how to describe it better. It's really, really good. And then the other thing I'm looking forward to reading is Dragging Your Bones, which is the second book in the this duology.
How good are those covers? I've got these on my TBR for this year.
Yeah, and they are indie published.
Yeah.
And they are queer normative worlds with badass magic systems, like sand boats. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to explain these books to you guys. They're really good. So yeah, that's book 1, that's book 2. Highly recommend them.
I watched Tatiana Obey on, I think it was Dominish Books. He does like an indie showcase every month. And her energy, I was like, yes, buy those books.
Yeah.
I need that energy in what I'm reading.
I've only read book 1. Cannot wait for book 2. Like, just got it. Can't wait to read it. Like, yeah, for an, like, and I am an indie author. This is good. Like, I'm just saying, like, it's amazing. Like, definitely check it out. The sand ships, like, I don't know. They got boats that go in the sand. Makes sense in the book. It's really cool. Like, I don't know how else to explain it.
All right, I'm sold. Sand ships.
It's yeah, I just 10 out of 10 recommend.
Cool. I love that. Yeah, I can't wait to read them. They've been on my list for a while, and like now I have to make TBR priority systems to make sure that I get to them.
Yeah, for sure.
So besides Taste of Gold and Iron, Chris, what else do you got for us?
Well, the one that I've read over the last quarter that comes to mind is I've actually read a fair amount of stories with queer characters in it, but they were queer normative. So the first one was Vevan Song by Jonathan Nays Mayers. I think that's how you pronounce it. And I didn't expect the sapphic romance in there at all, but it was sort of like and it was very much a subplot. Like it wasn't what the story was about at all, but it was quite sweet. They were two young girls who were really good friends during high school, and they had a falling out, and now one's sort of like part of this military group and one's escaped to an island, so they think that they hate each other, and then one of them just says, no, like, I liked you and I didn't know what to do with that in my body and in my person, and I've got to figure that out while all this other shit is going on in the background, because the story is fundamentally about how we as humans deal with grief after the loss of someone, and it's very heavy. The thematics in the book are very heavy, and also trying to cope with this new information, because our main protagonist is an openly bi female character. Like, there's no qualms about it, but this other character was more conservative and didn't really understand how to deal with that. So I liked that one. I also recently read The Ruptured Sky by Jessica A. McMinn, and that's coming out on April 4th. Very queer normative male romance within the book. No questions asked. He's just gay and he likes men. No one bats an eyelid at it. I really enjoyed that. And I've also been making my way through the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. So this is book 2. I will admit that I did not like this book as much as I liked the first book, which was A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Now, I have heard people like and dislike these books for various reasons. They are thematic heavy. They are not plot-based books.
I loved the first one. I haven't picked up the second one. I've been curious about it.
This one, I would recommend audio if you can listen to books on audio, because the narration is very easy to listen to, very easy to follow. This one is more dealing about humanity and the questions around humanity, and also normalizing neurotypical people. Like, there's conversations around autism and mental disabilities in this book, which I really appreciated. But it's queer normative, like no one really bats an eyelid.
Have you read any of the Murderbot Diaries by Martha?
Yeah,
Wells?
I've listened to the first 3 of them.
Yeah. It's just
and I quite like
vibes.
Yeah.
Different like intensity, but like I like Becky Chambers and Martha Wells in the way that they're like, yeah, space travel, whimsy.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen next? You know, like
Roger's gonna like roll his eyes at me because I don't like whimsy in a lot of fantasy, but I will forgive whimsy in sci-fi a lot.
You have to.
I prefer it in. You have to.
Like, you have to.
Which is the opposite with me, because when I'm reading sci-fi, I'm like, that's not how that science thing works. I have a hard time shutting down science, Roger brain, being like, excuse me, that is not how physics works.
I love wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Like, I like loosey goosey sci-fi fantasy.
And Roger's just like, no.
Happen at the stars.
I like it in fantasy, but I can't. Like, for whatever reason, as soon as you start using technical scientific terminology, it kicks into my science brain.
See, I'm like a Venn diagram. My preferences are like, it has to be gay or queer, whatever. And then I want a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of fantasy. It's going to be right in the middle.
So,
and we're going to be funny.
My recommendation for you, then, as a queer normative sci-fantasy, is Anonymity by Alexandra Almeida. And they reached out to me recently, and it is very shiny in this light, but I'll put a link to it in the description down below. So this author reached out, and she lives in Australia as well. I didn't know that. I think she lives in Canberra or Sydney or Canberra, because she messaged me and be like, hey, are you in Sydney anytime soon? Can we go get a drink? And I was like, ma'am, who are you? But honestly, so lovely and really sold me on this book. So I'm looking forward to picking that one up. And then on a more personal note, Jamie Raines, who was someone that I followed when I was questioning my gender, is coming out with a book called The T in LGBT. And the tagline is everything you need to know about being trans. And he was so fundamental in my own journey with the content he was producing when I was trying to figure stuff out that I am looking forward to reading his journey. For a long time, I could not read trans masculine stories because it would just make me feel weird. But now that I'm past that, I am enjoying reading a lot of memoirs around that topic. So yeah, those are the ones that I'm looking forward
But
to.
sir, the way you describe the Romance and Bevan song, you will like the Jasmine Throne. Just read it.
I've got it. I
At its
bought it
core,
with me.
it's
I've got the
epic
first
political
two.
fantasy, crazy, psychotic, evil emperor who wanted to burn his sister alive to get the magic from her death. She said no, so he sends her off to be imprisoned somewhere else to die until she says yes. It's so dark, and there's sub-sapphic crap. There's horror stuff that like really like vines underneath the skin, things in the skin, like The Last of Us when they like cut open the skin and there's like the fuzzy mold underneath. So that's the vibes of the Jasmine Throne's magic system.
Okay, I bought it with me, Roger, to try and read it before I went to Perth. I will. By the time you have put so many books in my TBR, and the
You're welcome.
Final Strife as well. I have to read that at some point. But I will always
I think you
bump
like the
trad
Jasmine
publishing
Throne
for
more than
indie
you like the
publishing.
Final Strife. The Final Strife is more plotty. The Jasmine Throne has a good mix of like vibes and atmosphere and plot, whereas Final Strife is much more like breakneck speed, reveal, what the hell's going on, kind of.
Did you say Final Vines or? No, I'm kidding. Poor joke. So they were all the questions.
That was like
that
me
I
when you were
today.
saying the ruptured sky. You were like male romance. I was like ruptured what? Oh,
oh there's always one, and it's always one. Okay, so I think that we have run through all the questions that I have, and that's a decent amount of time. I just want to say thank you all for being here this evening for Jess and Roger, and this morning for Jeff. Next time we do this, I'll try and make sure that I'm here on time rather than just tell you all and then forget daylight savings exists and be like, peace, see you in an hour.
Daylight savings was not on you. Like, you're good.
I'm sure that Rachel will enjoy being allowed to be back in the air conditioning because it's hot as Satan's butthole here in Queensland and humid AF. So we only have one little portable air conditioner in the room. So she's now just sitting in Sweatsville outside. Yeah, cool. Thank you, everyone. I will end the broadcast and hopefully not hang up on everyone, but we'll see. And apologies just in case. I've hit end the broadcast